Okay, let's dive into this explainer. Have you ever noticed how vessel inspection preparation almost always feels like this massive reactive panic? Someone announces an inspection date and suddenly, literally everyone is scrambling. Well, based on some really fascinating maritime research and field-tested strategies from Guide Solutions, there is actually a way to transform that chaotic scramble into a totally seamless daily rhythm. We're going to look at the exact framework that's actively changing how modern fleets handle compliance right now.
Look at this quote. A good ship should always be ready for inspections. 25 years at sea, 8 years as master, and I have rarely seen this in reality. That observation from Captain Debashi's Bazoo perfectly hooks into the universal struggle of maritime compliance. I mean, we all know a vessel should be ready at all times, right? But achieving that baseline state of readiness without completely bringing out the crew, that's always been the missing link.
And this brilliantly illustrates the core of the problem. Historically, the traditional approach has been totally reactive. It relies on last-minute sweeps, flying in expensive third-party auditors right before an event, and forcing crews to wade through massive bloated checklists. But there's a new approach emerging, a totally proactive paradigm. It's about systemic readiness. You're creating a visual daily rhythm where compliance just becomes a normal part of the workflow. No panic, no extra auditors. So how exactly do we get there? We're going to dissect 3 actionable steps from this research today. Step 1 is going granular, Step 2 is visualizing checklists, and Step 3 is reducing workload. All right, starting with Step 1, going granular. If we want a reliable compliance system, the journey has to begin by dissecting broad maritime regulations into specific, observable actions. Consider this super common checklist item. Is the fire extinguisher in good condition? Ask yourself, what does good even mean to a first-year cadet versus a highly experienced senior auditor? In the industry's attempt to make checklists shorter, actually, scratch that, by trying to make them shorter, they really just made them vaguer. Relying on subjective assumptions just creates massive confusion on board. Going granular means completely stripping those assumptions out of your checklists. A true first principles approach requires breaking down really heavy regulations like CIR 2.0, MARPOL, or the LS code into the smallest, most objective subparts possible. You aren't just checking the extinguisher, you're verifying specific observable actions. When the instructions are granular like this, even the most junior officer knows exactly what physical checks to perform without having to guess. Let's move to and see how this builds into Step 2, visualizing checklists. Once we have granular instructions, we immediately run into a major limitation, the written word itself. Think about this for a second. How do you explain tying a knot purely with text? Imagine trying to explain a rolling hitch tied to the strong point of a pilot ladder using only written paragraphs. It's nearly impossible, right? In an application-focused industry like maritime operations, text-heavy instructions so often lead to boxes getting ticked without the crew truly understanding the physical implication of what they're reading. Imagine the sheer volume and complexity of the equipment on a typical ship deck. Navigating a zone like that demands absolute visual context. You simply can't rely on abstract text when you need to verify the specific spacing of screws on a brake band or trace permanent pipelines in specific sections. Modern seafarers absolutely need to see exactly what compliant looks like in the real world. To solve this exact text limitation, the research team went out and created over 2,500 guidance photos, along with over 70 short, live-action videos literally shot on real ships. These aren't just animations. They are real-world visual guides meant to fully replace written instructions. It's essentially like putting a highly experienced 24/7 mentor right into the pocket of every single seafarer. So the crucial point is how these visual micro-narratives convert abstract knowledge into immediate muscle memory. For example, it's really hard to write out exactly where a rescue board usually cracks, but a 10-second video pointing to the exact weak spot, that's instant comprehension. Or the grab line, a short clip showing an inspector holding the line between 2 fingers and giving it a physical twist to check for internal phrase, clarifies the task instantly. It shows you not just what to do, but exactly how to do it. And that brings us to Step 3, reducing workload. Now, you might be thinking, granular checks, thousands of photos, videos, this sounds like a massive increase in our workload. That's a totally fair concern, which brings us to redesigning the checklist structure itself. Traditional checklists are honestly exhausting because they follow the structure of a regulatory rulebook. A chief officer might run from the bridge to the deck all the way down to the pump room just to satisfy one single chapter. The logical hack here is to switch to a zone-based approach.
If you walk into the pump room, you inspect every single item in that specific zone at the same time, regardless of which chapter it comes from. You do it once, and your workflow is vastly optimized. But we can actually optimize even further by asking this critical question. Does everything on your checklist actually need to be checked before every single inspection? Treating every single item on a 500-point list with the exact same level of urgency is honestly one of the most common and costly inefficiencies in maritime compliance today.
We fix this by introducing a time-based division. You categorize compliance checks into 3 really clear phases. First are the one-and-done checks at the start of a contract. These are your static elements, like are the mooring bits bead welded? Are the lifeboat seatbelts in contrasting colors? Well, if they're fine today, they're going to be fine tomorrow. Check them once and take them off the list. Second are the weekly or monthly dynamic checks, things that actually change over time, like SCBA bottle pressures. And finally, the 11th hour checks, which are targeted items that can really only be verified right as the vessel arrives in port.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the impact of isolating that first category. It is staggering. Simply removing those one-time static checks after they're verified can shrink a stressful, panicked pre-vetting checklist by almost 70%. 70%. That is a massive return of time and energy to your crew, completely turning an exhausting fire drill into a highly sustainable rhythm. So when you combine all 3 of these steps, going granular, visualizing the requirements, and reorganizing the workload by zone and by time, you trigger a massive paradigm shift. Compliance totally stops being a panic event and naturally becomes a daily habit. Junior officers are suddenly empowered with visual mentors right there on the deck. The whole focus shifts from reactive box ticking to proactive discovery. And the ultimate result? The vessel isn't just preparing for an inspection anymore. The vessel is simply always ready. It's really all about fundamentally building crew capability and confidence from the ground up. So I'll leave you with this thought to consider for your own operations. Is your current checklist a tool for actual organic discovery, or has it just become a reactive formality? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I highly encourage you to reevaluate your systems through this proactive visual lens.